Just a couple of moments, and the players are locked in. We're underway, seatbelts fastened, or not, because we have a Berlin.
Well, I also just noticed that Hans is higher rated than Hikaru, so those last couple games have actually flipped the higher rated player in this match. So Hans, he's getting ready. He's got the white pieces in this game, and we see these familiar pawn structures time after time, Danya. So I'm wondering when Hans will go to c4 like he did yesterday in a couple games against Magnus, or if he's just going to play best by test e4 every single game.
Yeah, of course, Hans is an e4 player by nature, but sometimes things aren't working out for you, and you need to start with a clean slate. Hans, of course, likes the Berlin with black as well. Both players are really experienced in these structures, so I don't think the game is going to be decided by the opening phase as long as they keep repeating, these Ruy Lopez structures. Hikaru is a little bit passive, though. Hans, he went d3, now he's played d4, and I think he's actually acquitted himself really well on the white side of whichever Ruy Lopez Hikaru has thrown at him.
You say passive and the Spanish. This is exactly what I played, when I was competitive. I always played these sort of wily positions where it looks like black is cramped, not doing much of anything. But that knight, as you're pointing out, can come to g5, and the d4 square is already under attack. And if white plays pawn to d5, you're shutting down the center, you're releasing the tension. I'll move my knight out the way, and then later I'll try to open things up.
I'm glad you mentioned that you played this, because I was going to accuse you of being a hypocrite. Maybe like 1% of the people will get this reference, but that's the 1% I care about. No, just kidding. I care about everyone equally. We have some trades in the center. Hikaru likes recapturing on e5 with the knight, and then with the bishop, he likes maintaining sort of the instability of the pawn structure. And we saw that game earlier, and of course he sabotages everything I just had to say as he takes back with the pawn. Here I actually like bishop d7 and knight c4, and the fact that this knight is just camping out on h7, that might become significant. I feel like white's slightly better. I mean, queen to d5 here, Robert. The pawn on e5 would become really weak in the event of a queen trade. Great positional chess by Hans.
Yeah, you and Hans speaking the same language right here. And look at Hans's face. I mean, I feel like he really has rebounded nicely, not just on the scoreboard, but just his demeanor. I think he is much more confident than he was when he trailed by 3 points. So queen d5 played. The change in pawn structure would help white. The e5 pawn would be a target. And knight f8 played, giving up b7 or not, because the knight c4 is loose.
Yeah, but that pawn is hanging. Rook a to d1 is essentially begging to be played, and black's pieces are sort of tripping up over each other, which happens sometimes when you've got a space disadvantage. Can black get away with rook a to d8, or are you going to end up losing the pawn on e5 at the end of the line? He goes rook a to c8, Robert. It's a slightly weird move. Almost looks like a mouse slip, but Hikaru doesn't ever mouse slip. It's like once per century. Is that the 1 per century mouse slip? I don't think so.
Feels like a Hikaru specialty. These sort of passive-looking moves that are perfect. Look at that. Rook c8, rook b8. I never would have thought just to shuffle my rooks like this without seemingly doing anything. But he's defended his b7 pawn. Knight takes b7. The queens are traded. You drop that knight there. So, Donnie, I would say this is actually pretty amazing defense. It seems like nothing has happened. But now Hikaru's up. What's 15, maybe about to be 20 seconds on the clock, and he's protecting all of his weaknesses.
My coach, he likes to call this bunker chess, right? You just kind of clump together. You're not playing for the space advantage. Everything's back on the 8th rank, but it gets increasingly frustrating, increasingly more tilting for the opponent. Now e5 is defended, and it almost feels like a victory when you have equalized. It's like the Scottish GM, Jonathan Rosen, he calls it the goalkeeper's glory, right? How does the goalkeeper keep himself motivated? Is he maybe will score 1 goal for his entire career? Well, it's just constantly deflecting your opposing side's goals that keep you in the game. And when you're on the defensive, that's how you're motivating yourself to keep defending. Hikaru's also up 30 seconds on the clock somehow. Kicks the knight away from c4. Black is close to equalizing, but hats off to Hans. He's kept his pieces on really active squares, and he still has that nice little grip down the d-file.
And white's position is better, but the reason it's harder to play is because you have that slight advantage and you want to prove it. So the knight on e3, will the rook move back so the knight can land on d5? That looks tempting. Knight g4 is an idea in many of these positions. An h5 play to stop the knight from getting there. And then f3, so white's pawn structure is very healthy. The rook on c6 for black is kind of awkward. It pushed the knight back from c4, but it has nowhere to go from there.
One of the biggest differences between human play and engine play is humans use the idea that it's hard to make a move, right? Hans is improving slowly, but it's very hard for Hikaru to find a move that doesn't harm his position, that doesn't blunder a pawn, that doesn't leave a square exposed, a fork, knight to e7 later down the line. He gets his knight into f4, though, encouraging this rook to drop into d7. Now the h4 pawn is actually hanging. Will we see Hans take it, or will this knight seek even a bigger role on d5? Bishop h4 is a move.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this because bishop takes h4 is viable, as you mentioned. Knight takes h4. What is black's idea? Because you have just stolen the pawn, and now that the knight retreated to e6 for black, h4 is a permanent weakness. And now e5 is directly targeted. So I do feel like Hikaru, he's doing well on the clock, but the position is improving for Hans.
This has been a really exciting game. I mean, it was an anti-Berlin. It looks like nothing has happened, and yet so much has remained behind the scenes, and the tension, right? Every move carries a threat, but now Hans's clock is dwindling. Is he running out of threats to create? He gives Hikaru a tempo. f5 is not out of the question as Hikaru gets some space on the queen side, but he gives up this c5 square, and can he afford that with his position already this fragile?
Bishop c5 played, bishop takes f8, rook d7 coming soon, and after c6, the d6 square is white's for the taking, but Hikaru continues, as you said, to bunker up. He's just trying to keep everything defended. Bishop e7, another good move.
Look at this. Look at his pieces.
It looks
what shape is that? Is that a trapezoidal rhombus, a rhombozoidal trapezoid?
It looks so terrible for black, and yet Hikaru is hanging right in there. He dropped a6 pawn. What does he want after rook takes a6?
And he had to play that. I think the other rook coming to d8 is what scared him, because rook g8, there was a mate threat, so at least he wards off the rook. Finally plays f5 a little bit later than I thought he would, and the position is heating up just as Hans's clock is dwindling down. Black's knight could also try to access those juicy dark squares on the king side. This ain't over.
No, it's not. King h6.
Oh, knight g3.
Yeah, this king can go up the board for black as well. He's pinning the...
Oh, knight f2, f4 mate.
Oh, that is crazy. Look at Hans's time. He's got no time. Rook d7's coming.
And then f4 check is actually going to win the knight. What does Hans do? He's down to 1 second. He's going to lose this game. He drops the e4 pawn.
Okay, will Hikaru take it is the big question. He goes to just double his rooks first, but no, he grabs that pawn, knight back, and now the e-pawn is dangerous.
And Hikaru playing really fast. He feels confident that he can win this game on the board and on the clock. He's got two enemies, Hans, that he's fighting as the knight drops back to f5, clearing the red carpet for the e-pawn. Suddenly looks like that pawn, I mean, these obstacles are just going to be blown off the board, and Hans loses on time.
Wow.
What a turnaround.
I mean, look at...
Just like, the thing is with Hikaru is that, I don't know, he's 35?
Or 36.
36, yeah. And I'm 21.
Promise me whatever's about to happen will be like short and sweet. I feel like we
no,
covered a lot of ground.
The thing with Hikaru is that I don't have to win. I don't have to beat him today. But he's 36. Like, there's going to be a time when Hikaru's sitting in his pineapple shirt and he's not playing chess anymore. And he's just going to have to watch me win tournament after tournament. And he's going to be too old to even compete.
By then I'll have 10 million subs.
So I prefer not even to beat him. I just would like him to not even have the chance to compete against. So like, I want him, like, my reign is going to last so long that he's going to be at the age of like just like he can't even walk anymore, and I'm still going to be winning. So that is how I imagine.
You're going to be like 70 and he's still winning?
I intend on sort of keeping the power. So okay, I can beat him while he's playing, but I think the best part will be like when he's just done and then he has to watch me. Sort of like that's the ultimate.